Welcome to episode 1 of When Things Go Wrong, Emergencies and How to Handle Them. I'm Gavin Robenheimer and I've been involved in mountain rescue here in the Drakensberg Mountains of South Africa since October 1991, and for 28 years of that I've been a senior mountain rescue organizer, and more particularly for 16 years of that I was the rescue convener, or the boss basically of mountain rescue. As a result, and particularly during those 16 years, I took the lion's share of mountain rescue calls and went on most of the operations. And even if I wasn't on the operation, it was my job to know what was going on and to hand out advice or whatever to whoever was leading the operation. As a commercial guide of just over 30 years now, I've been in charge of groups where there have been problems and emergencies, and these things range from me guiding a client on Mount Kenya, and on the way down she fell. I held the fall, but she still hit her foot on a piece of rock and broke a small bone in her foot, and she had to be helped down the mountain, short roping her down over the ski slopes down to the Lewis Glacier. On the other hand, here in the Drakensberg a number of years ago, we had the tragic incident of a friend of mine who, while leading on ice, had a heart attack and fell and died on the scene, and I was in charge of the meet and had to organize the party who went and retrieved the body with the aid of a helicopter, and just deal with the fallout of those kind of incidences. On the other hand, on a more personal scale, I've had the misfortune of being in a helicopter crash and obviously survived it. And a helicopter crash at high altitude in snow on top of the Drakensberg. I've been bitten by a snake and had to deal with that, and was once evacuated off Giant's Castle with what turned out to be encephalitis. So, in other words, I've seen rescues and emergencies from perhaps three sides: from the mountain rescue point of view, and myself personally being involved in these things, and on the other hand being in charge of a party that had an emergency. So I'd like to share with you over this episode and the next two episodes some of the things I've learnt over these years about how you handle things and how things work and how things sometimes don't work. And we might also try to get out some of the misperceptions about how mountain rescue teams work, and particularly how helicopters operate in mountainous terrain. So then, let's get into episode 1, where I'm going to talk about the skills, the knowledge that is needed when hiking in a mountain party and there is some kind of a problem or emergency. And overall, what the idea here is so that we get the best outcome for the patient, if there is a patient, for the party and for the rescue team, that things go well and ultimately the situation is running at its best. So here in episode 1, we're going to talk about what happens, should we say, on the ground, on the scene where there's a problem in the mountains. And I'm going to discuss some of the things that should happen and some of the leadership that needs to happen in those kinds of situations. Number 1, somebody in the party needs to take control and to have charge over the party. This could be a mountain guide or the designated leader, or simply somebody who is perhaps the most experienced in a situation. Then number 2, that person who's going to take charge, their first priority is they themselves mustn't panic. And I know this is very hard, and I know this can be a very hard task to do, especially if you, the person or the leader of the party, actually saw the incident happen. But it's something that has to happen to get everything under control and that good decisions are made later. And then that person's task, whoever's going to be in charge, their first task after this is that they must get everybody else in the party to calm down and don't panic either. And in these kind of situations, you can have people shouting and screaming for various people to do various things, etc. But it ultimately usually won't help. Everybody's got to be calmed down, and then people need to start to think about what the situation is really and how they're going to deal with it. Then the third thing that needs to happen in a situation like this is that you need to remove, if there's a patient or patients, you need to remove them out of danger if there is danger. And for example, if they have been struck by lightning on a ridge, then drag them off the ridge and get the whole party off the ridge, that not more people are struck by lightning. It could be a person who has slipped in a river, they've broken their leg. Don't leave them in the river to get hypothermia. You've got to get them out fairly soon and keep them warm. Don't leave them in the danger zone. Now, after you've removed the person from immediate danger, your next task is probably going to be to administer some first aid. And you administer first aid to the best of your ability, or to the best of the ability of the most experienced person who's got perhaps some kind of qualification in first aid within the party. Then once that is done, and for instance you might have splintered a person's arm, they've fallen over, they've had their arm splintered and so on. Then the fifth point, I cannot emphasize enough, you need to take time to work out a plan. Now, keeping in mind that many incidences that happen in the mountains do not require immediate response from a first aid or medical point of view. You've often got a lot of time. So take the time, sit down, even have a cup of tea, talk about it, work out a plan. And you might want to consult various people within your party about what you think should happen. And then once you've got a proper plan and you're thinking carefully, then you can go ahead. And the plan might be to call a mountain rescue team, and that might require somebody perhaps running up a hill with their cell phone and making that phone call. But it might not always mean that one has to call a mountain rescue team. You could maybe simply walk the patient out who's got a broken arm and they're not very far from the roadhead. So before you make hasty decisions, think and work it out. Then, on the note of a team leader making a plan, sitting down, having a cup of tea to work out what to do, just note that in our rescue team, we have this kind of rule that says that when we get a phone call, and even a very urgent sounding phone call, and somebody might be phoning in a complete panic and shouting out information, what we'll do is we'll take down the information, their phone number, etc. And once we have all that, we put the phone down and then spend some time just thinking about what to do and what actually is the situation. And we might even phone somebody else, one of the other rescue leaders, and bounce ideas off them long before we start tasking a rescue team and a helicopter, etc. So that ultimately that perhaps 15-20 minutes spent planning the operation, it means that the actual rescue is more likely to happen in a proper and coherent manner. On the note of somebody kind of taking charge of the situation, the mountain guide, the mountain leader, it's also worth noting that a common problem is a person, they will a person will decide that, for instance, a mountain rescue team will be called, and this call is made to whatever agency they've decided to phone. And then after a very short time, they don't get a particular, they've made the call, the particulars of the situation have been noted down by somebody, and the shall we say, the wheels have started to turn. But because they're sitting in a situation where they're very anxious and they want to see things starting to happen very quickly, so then they decide to phone another agency, so perhaps a police department or a private ambulance service or something like that. And I've particularly had people phoning 4, 5, 6 different agencies, all explaining to them the situation, and then you have 4 or 5 agencies all trying to go and do a mountain rescue. Some of them can't do it themselves, and yet they will certainly still try to do it. They'll still try to help, and what you end up is an enormous bun fight of different agencies all trying to do the same job, simply because they were called by the same person who was not thinking about what to do and how to do it properly. The other scenario from that is that the leader of that party also needs to stop other members of the party phoning out also, and they might not be phoning other emergency agencies, but they start to phone their parents or their next of kin or their wife or boyfriend or something like that. Those people then in turn start phoning other agencies, and eventually it is just an enormous mess up of people clogging the lines, phoning mountain rescue teams, and in many cases it was me, starting to get phone calls from various people all over the country, all trying to help, and it's not helping at all. So tell people within your party, do not start phoning out and spreading stories about what is in fact going on. And on that note, I can think of a few years back receiving a call for a person with a broken leg on a place called Leslie's Pass, and in the central Drakensberg. This person was injured at fairly high altitude, and I started to organize a rescue team and helicopter. And then I started to get other phone calls for somebody with a broken arm, and it sounded like it was further down the same valley, and it's not impossible that one could have 2 rescues in the same valley. And it took quite a long time to work out that in actual fact we were talking about the same kind of situation, the very same situation. But in the process of other people in this party phoning out, other agencies became involved. They started to phone me, and all in all, the phone lines became clogged up with basically what was false information. And it took me a long time to work out that in actual fact this was the same incident now being reported badly and incorrectly to me, and in fact it caused some kind of a delay in the correct response to the person with the broken leg. Then when you phone out for a mountain rescue team, you want to get yourself into obviously a place where you have good comms, and hopefully you can speak directly to the mountain rescue leader. You might have to use WhatsApp or something like that if you can't get a good cell phone signal. But then what the kind of information that you're going to give over is, you want to explain what the situation is, obviously. If there's a patient involved, you're going to give the patient's age, name, the nature of the injury, any medication that they perhaps are on, their gender. The rescue team want to know if they are on some sort of medical aid or insurance policy. You want to note what the weather is at present at your exact location, the wind direction and strength, and the kind of terrain that the that you are located in, whether it's steep or if you're in trees or bush or anything like that. That's all important information that a rescue team needs to know. Then you need, as a leader of a party, or somebody needs to stay in the position where that good communication is had. Very often a rescue team is going to phone back or send a message back asking for more information and updating you about the progress of how things are going before they will arrive. And this, bearing in mind that you might have to send somebody up to the top of a hill or top of a ridge in order to get those comms going, and in order to get the information as is when needed, you might have to have somebody running up and down the hill to transfer that information to the person on the telephone. Now, obviously, you want to state to the rescue team where you are located, where this incident has occurred. And bearing in mind that in most cases, the rescue team that you are phoning knows the kind of terrain where you are, knows those mountains, and that a verbal description of where you are is probably going to be the best way of describing how they're going to find you. And I'll give you an example. If you stated that you were 2 kilometers upstream in the riverbed, upstream of the Tseke Tseke hut in the Tseke Tseke Pass, and the rescue team is going to know exactly where to find you. That's very easy. And if you are going to give coordinates, they might ask you for those coordinates, but try to state the coordinates in ordinary degrees, minutes and seconds, not in decimal degrees or decimal minutes. The reason for that is one doesn't have to be dead accurate about where you are within 1 meter or something like that. And also bear in mind that if a helicopter is going to be used, those decimal degrees or minutes have to be converted into ordinary degrees, minutes and seconds, because that's how aircraft fly. Their navigation systems are set to that system. And one can have problems with when a decimal degree or decimal minute is converted over. You can make a slight miscalculation in the formula, and you can only have to be 500 meters out, and we've had helicopters flying up the wrong valley looking for people because the conversion wasn't perfect, or in the GPS system there's been a slight error if you're contained in a valley, and the coordinates which are read out to the rescue team are slightly out, and people start to look in the wrong place. But a verbal description is the number one way of describing where you are. So in conclusion, if we look back at this first episode, we have said the person who is in charge mustn't panic. The whole party that they're in charge of must be kept calm. You take the patient out of the danger zone. You administer first aid to the best of your ability. You sit down, you make a plan, you take your time, you make that rescue call to whatever agency you've decided is best. And then there comes a very kind of difficult period. Now, bearing in mind that different rescue teams have different protocols, and often the terrain and the weather conditions are going to make a difference to how quickly a rescue team can come to assist a party. Now, if you are for instance, in Cape Town, and there's an incident on Table Mountain or on Lion's Head, you can make a phone call there and get help pretty fast, simply because the distance from where the rescue team is based to where the incident could have happened is not very far. Whether people are walking up to the patient in bad weather, or if a helicopter is being used, it's all very close. And the same would go for certain rescue teams in the Alps. You have fairly small distances between where the rescue team is based and where the incident could have happened. But then if you go to greater wilderness areas like the Drakensberg or the Hex River Mountains in the Cape, when an incident occurs, it's going to, first of all, probably take some time to get to a position where good communication can be made. And then, because of the distance from where the rescue team is based to where the incident is, it's going to take a certain amount of time. And if the weather is bad or it's at night and a rescue team has to drive and then walk in, it will take a long time. And if a helicopter is going to be used, and bearing in mind that in high wilderness areas, certainly in South Africa, the only aircraft that are really useful there are South African Air Force aircraft. They have the power and capabilities of flying at high altitude and hovering, and they're equipped with winches. In order to get one of those aircraft airborne is not a fast process. Various orders have to be sent, and the aircraft has to be authorized to fly. And what this all means is that from the time that the call is made out in the wilderness to when a rescue team actually gets airborne could be quite a long time. That means the leader of the party waiting to be assisted needs to keep his team, his group of people occupied, perhaps give them various tasks to do, fetching water, making food, etc. Stop them from phoning out, making other calls to other agencies or to next of kin, which will then, as I explained earlier, just cause the whole incident to become a bit of a bun fight. It doesn't help, and the party has got a long and boring and quite often anxious period to wait until assistance actually arrives on the ground. In the next episode, I'm going to talk to you a bit about other aspects of patient care and also about the various ways of removing a patient off the mountain. I will also speak about how to prepare for an airlift off the mountain during a mountain rescue. I certainly hope that this information will be of use to you.